My husband, the man who swore to protect me, used my family inheritance to buy a flashy sports car for his mistress. Then, he was brazen enough to tell me about it, like it was some kind of trophy. That night, at Denver's most expensive restaurant, Leo broke everything, but he didn't know one thing. I had already set the trap, and he just drove right into it. My name is Maya. To the glittering crowd inside the grand ballroom, I was Maya Vance, 38 years old, the composed, elegant wife of Leo Vance, Viridian Solutions' 40-year-old rising star. We were, by every metric that mattered in Denver's elite circles, the golden couple. Tonight's charity gala was a monument to that perfect, polished illusion. The clinking of champagne flutes sounded like tiny, fragile bells, and the air hummed with forced laughter and the heavy scent of expensive perfume. Flashbulbs from the event photographer popped relentlessly, capturing our practiced smiles as we navigated the room. Leo, my husband, was incandescent. He had just closed the biggest quarter of his career, and he was high on the applause and at least 4 glasses of vintage champagne. His success was palpable, a heat radiating from him that drew people in. He grabbed my hand, his grip tighter than necessary, his palm slick with sweat. He pulled me away from a conversation with a city councilman and through the tall French doors, out onto the stone balcony. The crisp November night air hit me, a sharp contrast to the stuffy atmosphere inside. I braced myself, expecting a moment of quiet celebration, perhaps a stolen, drunken kiss where he would tell me how much he needed me by his side. I should have known better. "We need to talk," he slurred slightly, leaning against the ornate railing. He turned his back to the party, but he wasn't looking at me. He was looking out over the city lights, as if addressing them. "Ooh, Leo, what is it people are watching?" I murmured, keeping the supportive wife smile fixed in place. I was intensely aware of the figures inside, shadows moving behind the reflective glass. "This is important," he said, puffing his chest out in a caricature of masculine gravity. "I need to be honest." My stomach tightened. Honesty, in Leo's vocabulary, was never a prelude to anything good. It was a word he used to justify cruelty, a shield he held up before throwing a spear. "I'm having an affair," he said, the words blunt and artless, hitting the cold air and dissolving. I held my breath. The smile did not waver. Inside the ballroom, I could see Martin Epps, his direct superior, watching us through the glass. He raised his glass in a silent, oblivious toast. "It's a relationship, really," Leo corrected himself, warming to his topic now that the first hurdle was cleared. "Her name is Kylie. She's amazing, a life coach. She's only 26, but she understands things." "She understands me." I said nothing. I just watched the reflection of the ballroom lights in his glassy, self-satisfied eyes. I focused on the sound of the traffic far below, a distant, steady rush. He seemed emboldened by my silence, mistaking my control for submission. This was the part he had really wanted to get to. "Look, Maya, I know things have been static between us, and I've been handling a lot of pressure." He ran a hand through his expensive, meticulously styled hair. "The trust your grandfather left. I know it's complicated, but I needed to access some of it." A cold, sharp focus settled over me, cutting through the ambient noise of the party. My hearing narrowed until the only thing I could hear was his voice. "I had to move some money," he continued, waving his hand dismissively as if swatting away a fly. "It was just a small dip, honey. $80,000. $80,000. He said it like he was talking about 80 cents. He had accessed my grandfather's money, the money my grandfather had explicitly warned me he would one day try to take. "I bought her a car," he announced, a proud, foolish grin spreading across his face. He actually looked proud. The sheer, unadulterated audacity of it almost made me laugh. She needed something reliable, something nice. You know she deserves it. A red Mercedes AMG convertible. He paused, waiting for the explosion. He was braced for the tears, the screaming match, the accusations. He wanted the drama. He wanted me to make a scene right here, at his moment of triumph, so he could paint me as hysterical and himself as the tortured man trapped between two women. I gave him none of it. I remained perfectly still, the painted smile cemented in place. I let my gaze drift back into the room, meeting Martin Epps's eyes again. I nodded politely, as if Leo were merely discussing the mediocre catering. I could feel the tension radiating off Leo, his confusion mounting. This was not the reaction he had anticipated. He reached out and patted my hand, a gesture of such profound condescension it almost broke my composure. "Hey," he said, his voice softening into a practiced, sympathetic tone. "I know this is hard to hear. I know it's a shock, but we're strong. We can get through this. I needed that freshness. You know she really sees me. Maya. She sees you." The words echoed in my head, a perfect, bitter summary of his bottomless narcissism. I turned my head slowly, pulling my hand away from his damp, champagne-sticky skin. I looked directly into his eyes, letting the smile finally drop, replacing it with something cool and appraising. "A red car?" I asked, my voice even, almost conversational. "Interesting choice. Are you sure she likes it?" Confusion flickered across his face, quickly followed by a flash of annoyance. This was not in his script. He expected tears or rage. He got quiet analysis. He was waiting for me to break. He was waiting for me to fall apart right here on the balcony of his corporate triumph, to validate his decision to seek comfort elsewhere. What he failed to understand, what he had never understood in our 12 years of marriage, was that I was not fragile. I was not the woman who would weep over his betrayal. I was my grandfather's granddaughter. He thought he was confessing. He thought he was taking control of the narrative, forcing my hand. The truth was far simpler. Leo wasn't just a cheater. He was an arrogant, lazy fool. And with that drunken, pathetic confession, he had just confirmed every piece of evidence I needed. He had just activated the final, irreversible clause in a plan I had set in motion 6 months ago. He hadn't just confessed to an affair. He had confessed to felony fraud, and he had just handed me his entire future, gift-wrapped in a shiny, red convertible. Leo didn't understand the ground he was standing on, financially or otherwise. He never had. He saw my inheritance as a personal bank account he had unfortunately limited access to, a nuisance of paperwork rather than an ironclad fortress. He had no concept of the architecture, the traps, or the genius of the man who built it. My grandfather, Arthur, wasn't just wealthy. He was a strategic mastermind who had built his fortune from nothing, and he could read people like a stock ticker. From the moment I introduced Leo to him, 12 years ago, Arthur saw straight through the expensive suit and the blindingly white, charming smile. After that first dinner, he took me aside while Leo was charming my cousins. "That man," Arthur said, his voice quiet but sharp, "is a soulless salesman. He spends all day selling himself. Maya, don't be surprised when he one day tries to sell you, too." He didn't trust him, and because he didn't trust him, he built a defense system. My real inheritance, the true $5 million of my family's legacy, sits in an irrevocable trust so tightly bound by legal protections that Leo could never, ever touch it. It was designed to survive recessions, bad investments, and, most importantly, bad marriages. But Arthur knew a man like Leo, a man driven by ego and a desperate need for the appearance of success, would be infuriated by a vault he couldn't open. So, Arthur built a second, much smaller vault, and he left the key dangling right beside the lock. He called it the Family Management Fund, a decoy trust. It held $100,000. It was the only part of the estate that Leo, as my husband, could legally access, but with one critical, non-negotiable stipulation: he required my explicit, written signature for any withdrawal of any amount. It was a test, a baited trap. If he wants your money, Maya, Arthur had told me, signing the final papers with his attorney, he'll have to come to you and ask. When he asks, you'll know exactly what he is. If he ever tries to take it without asking, he's a thief. But if he asks, he's just a fool, and fools are so much easier to manage. Leo proved himself the fool exactly 6 months ago. He came into my home office, shutting the door with a theatrical, heavy sigh. He was radiating that false, urgent energy he always got when he wanted something big. "Maya, baby," he said, perching on the edge of my desk. "I have the opportunity of a lifetime." He pitched me. He actually pitched me, like I was one of his clients at Veridian. It was a top-secret investment opportunity. Something about offshore data servers, an exclusive executive buy-in. "It's going to change our lives, Maya," he whispered, grabbing my hands. He needed $80,000. He needed it fast, before the window closed. This was for us. He pleaded, he cajoled, he painted a glorious, shimmering picture of our future, all funded by this one secret deal. He just needed my signature on the withdrawal forms from the Family Management Fund. And I signed them. I smiled. I told him I believed in him, and I signed every single page. Because what Leo didn't know, what he couldn't possibly fathom in his self-obsessed little world, was that I already knew about Kylie. I had known for 3 months. I had the private investigator's report, complete with photographs and hotel receipts, locked in the bottom drawer of the very desk he was leaning against. I knew about the life coach specializing in spiritual alignment and sleeping with her clients. I knew about the late-night meetings and the weekend seminars. So, when Leo came to me, begging for $80,000, I didn't sign because I was a loyal, trusting wife. I signed because I needed the final, undeniable proof of financial abuse. His infidelity was a moral failing. This was a crime. He was actively leveraging our marriage to defraud me, using a fabricated investment as a cover to siphon my inheritance to fund his affair. I wasn't signing away my money. I was signing his confession. Leo thought he was just playing with the $100,000 decoy fund. He had no idea what that signature actually did. My grandfather, as I said, was a brilliant strategist. Tucked deep within the dense, boring legal jargon of the main $5 million trust, the one Leo didn't even know he couldn't touch, was a very specific, very sharp covenant. It was called the Moral Turpitude Clause. It stated, in no uncertain terms, that if my spouse were to commit an act of gross moral misconduct, which was explicitly defined as adultery, and simultaneously commit an act of willful financial abuse against me or my estate, the entire structure of the trust would immediately and irrevocably change. The moment those two conditions were met, infidelity and fraud, Leo's status as a beneficiary by marriage was not just voided, it was vaporized. Furthermore, the clause stipulated that any and all significant marital assets funded or maintained by the trust's income, which included our entire stock portfolio and our beautiful, sprawling home in Hilltop, would immediately revert to my sole, undivided ownership. Not shared, not communal, mine. For 3 months, I had the adultery. I was just waiting for the willful financial abuse. Leo, in his greedy, arrogant haste to buy his 26-year-old mistress a convertible, had just handed it to me, wrapped in a bow. His drunken confession on the balcony tonight wasn't the bomb. It was just the sound of the fuse finally hitting the powder. He had signed his own financial death warrant 6 months ago. Tonight, he was just bragging about it. The gala broke up late. I slept soundly for the first time in months. Leo, on the other hand, tossed and turned, his sleep ragged with champagne and self-importance. He was gone before 7 a.m., mumbling something about needing space to think after his big confession. He was, of course, heading straight to Kylie. He probably couldn't wait to tell her how brave he was, how he'd finally started the conversation with his difficult wife. I let him go. I had work to do. I didn't go to my office. Logos Prime Consulting, my software consultancy, could run itself for a morning. I founded it, built it, and staffed it with people far smarter than Leo. Instead, I took my own car, a discreet, dark gray sedan, and drove to Cherry Creek. It's the neighborhood in Denver where new money and even newer mistresses go to feel established. The private investigator's report had given me the address 3 months ago, but I'd never visited. I never needed to. Until today, it was exactly where I knew it would be. Parked in a guest spot at her upscale apartment complex, gleaming stupidly in the bright morning sun, the Mercedes AMG, blood red, a midlife crisis on wheels. It was so new it still had the temporary tags in the rear window. Kylie, or perhaps Leo, had parked it carelessly, slightly over the line. I pulled up behind it. I took my time. I was methodical. I got out of my car, my hands perfectly steady. I used my phone to take a wide shot of the car in the parking space, capturing the building number in the background. I took a close-up of the temporary tag. Then, I walked to the front, leaned over the hood, and photographed the small metal plate visible through the windshield. The VIN, the vehicle identification number, the car's unique, unchangeable fingerprint. I checked the photos. They were clear. Perfect. I got back in my car and dialed. She picked up on the second ring, her voice always clipped and impatient before 9 a.m. Avery Walsh. Avery, it's Maya. Did he talk? She asked. No pleasantries. That's why I hired her. Avery Walsh was the most feared divorce attorney in Colorado, a woman who didn't just win cases, she annihilated opponents. Like a faucet. Avery. All night, I said, leaning my head back against the seat. He confessed to the affair, the woman's name, and the car. He actually bragged about the car. Did you get it? Of course. My phone was recording in my clutch purse the entire time. The audio is crystal clear. I have the signed disbursement papers from 6 months ago. And, I said, looking at the red convertible in my rearview mirror, I am currently looking at the car. I have the VIN. There was a brief pause on the line, the closest Avery ever came to expressing delight. Excellent. The confession triggers the moral turpitude clause in the main trust. The disbursement papers prove the financial abuse. The VIN is the final nail. She paused again. But did you do the other thing? The little piece of administrative magic I suggested when he asked for the money. I smiled, looking at the briefcase on my passenger seat. I had brought it with me, just to savor the moment. Of course I did. Avery, I'm holding it in my hand right now. Inside the briefcase was a file folder, and inside that folder was the key to this entire beautiful locked door trap. Leo was lazy. That was his greatest sin, even more than the infidelity. He was lazy, arrogant, and allergic to details. When he had come into my office 6 months ago, frantic for that $80,000, he was in a hurry. He just wanted the money. He would have signed anything. So I gave him 2 things to sign. The first was the official, notarized withdrawal form for the $80,000 disbursement from the Family Management Fund. He had read that one, or at least skimmed it. The second was a much more boring-looking stack of papers. Just a few pages of standard corporate boilerplate. It's just the tax forms for the disbursement. Leo, I had said, sliding them over with a pen. My accountant insists. Standard procedure for the fund. Just sign at the bottom. He didn't read a single word. He just scribbled his name, impatient to be done, already dreaming of his investment. It wasn't a tax form. It was an authorization. It was a purchase agreement and a bill of sale, pre-filled, authorizing Logos Prime Consulting, LLC, my company, my sole asset from before the marriage to purchase one Mercedes AMG. And the last page he signed, it was the application for the vehicle's title, listing Logos Prime Consulting as the sole owner. He had signed as a witness, agreeing to the transaction. He hadn't just given me the money to buy the car. He had, in his haste, legally signed off on my company owning it. My company. Logos Prime Consulting is my fortress. I founded it 5 years before I even met Leo, built from my own expertise and seed money from a small loan I paid back in 18 months. It is, in the driest, most beautiful legal terms, a separate and premarital asset. It belongs wholly and exclusively to me. Leo has no stake in it. He has no access. He doesn't even really understand what we do, dismissing it as tech stuff. This corporate veil, which he saw as a boring hobby, was the perfect legal instrument. I have to go back to that conversation 6 months ago, the day he came into my office, sweating with manufactured urgency. After he finished his breathless, vague pitch about the secret investment, I didn't just sign the papers. I paused. I put my pen down and leaned back, pretending to weigh the consequences. Leo, $80,000 is a huge amount to just pull out in cash, I said, my voice full of practiced concern. The fund administrators won't just write a check. It triggers all kinds of tax events. It's messy. The IRS will be all over us for a withdrawal that large without a clear purpose. I was fabricating a problem, of course, but I was banking on his lethal combination of greed and laziness. He knew nothing about tax law or trust administration. His face fell. Just as I expected. He was annoyed. He needed this to be easy. So what? He pressed. It's your money, isn't it? Just tell them to release it. It's not that simple, I said, holding up a hand. But I do have an idea, a way to structure this, a way to make it smart, for tax purposes. So the accountants are happy. He latched onto that immediately. Smart how I need this done fast. Maya. I can't just give you the cash from the trust, I lied. But my company, Logos Prime, can purchase an asset. We can structure this as a business deal. The company will use the $80,000 to acquire a tangible asset for you, and then we'll lease that asset to you, personally, for your investment. It's the only way to do it cleanly. We document it as a corporate lease. It's all legal, all above board, just paperwork. His eyes glazed over at the words corporate lease and tangible asset. He didn't understand them, and he didn't care to. He didn't ask what the asset would be. He didn't ask to see the lease agreement. He just heard a solution that got him the money without any work on his part. Amazing, honey, he said, visibly relieved. Perfect. You handle it. Do whatever you need to do. You're the smart one with that stuff. He kissed my forehead, triumphant, already spending the money in his head. This is going to be huge for us. So I did exactly what I said I would do. I had him sign the withdrawal form. The $80,000 was transferred from the Family Management Fund, not to Leo, but directly into the corporate accounts of Logos Prime Consulting, a clean, documented transfer from one entity I controlled to another. A day later, Logos Prime Consulting, LLC, purchased one Mercedes-AMG convertible in cash. For the past 3 months, Leo and Kylie have been driving that car. They have been flaunting it all over Denver, laughing, taking pictures for her Instagram, feeling powerful. They believed it was his, bought with his cleverness, a shiny red symbol of his new life. They thought they were enjoying the spoils of his affair. In reality, they were committing a crime. That car is not a gift. It is not a personal vehicle. It is a corporate asset. It belongs, fully and legally, to my company. And I am Logos Prime Consulting. I used my own money, funneled through the decoy trust, to purchase an asset that I, and I alone, own through my premarital corporation. Leo's critical mistake was believing the money was his to spend. It was only ever mine to deploy. He didn't just commit adultery. He didn't just lie. He actively defrauded me. He tricked me into liquidating a portion of my inheritance under the false pretense of a marital investment. He then took possession of a high-value corporate asset, my asset, and immediately handed it over to his mistress, who has been using it illegally, racking up miles on my property. He's not just an unfaithful husband. He's an embezzler. When I explained this entire maneuver to Avery Walsh on the phone that morning, she was silent for a full 10 seconds. I thought she might be looking up a statute. Maya, she finally said, and I could hear the rare, carnivorous smile in her voice. This isn't just leverage in a divorce negotiation. This isn't just a gotcha moment. This is a gift from God. You've documented clear, undeniable, textbook financial fraud. He didn't just cheat, he stole. She was right. The trap wasn't just set, he was already caught in it. He just didn't know the teeth had closed yet. I drove back to Hilltop, back to the house Leo thought of as his greatest acquisition. He loved this sprawling modern box of glass and steel. He loved showing it off. He never bothered to read the deed, which clearly stated it was purchased and maintained by my grandfather's primary trust. He was a guest here, one who had wildly overstayed his welcome. The house was silent. I walked through the rooms, feeling no sense of loss, only a quiet, focused anger. This was an administrative task. I went to his walk-in closet, the one he called his sanctuary, and began my work. I used my phone to photograph the absurd collection of designer sneakers he kept in pristine boxes, having worn them perhaps once. I moved to his dressing table and documented, one by one, his collection of high-end watches. He had 6 of them, each one a monument to his vanity, bought with money siphoned from our joint accounts. Then, I went to the climate-controlled wine cellar in the basement, his pride and joy. He loved boring dinner guests with details about the Bordeaux. I took meticulous photographs of the inventory, case by case. These were all assets, and Avery would need a full accounting when she filed the injunction to freeze everything. I was simply taking inventory of what was, as of last night, legally mine. In my home office, I closed the door and made my next call. This one wasn't to my lawyer. It was to Cynthia Bright, a senior board member at Viridian Solutions. Cynthia and I had served on 2 charity boards together. We weren't friends, but we respected each other. I knew she valued stability and hated liability above all else. Cynthia, I apologize for the intrusion. I started, pitching my voice with just the right amount of wifely concern. I'm calling about something a bit unusual. I'm hoping you can clarify a business matter for me. Maya, of course. Is everything all right? Her voice was crisp. I kept the affair out of it. That was personal. Messy. This was business. I'm just a bit concerned. 6 months ago, Leo initiated a significant financial transaction, $80,000, which he claimed was a top priority investment opportunity through Viridian. He was quite secretive about it. It was structured through my own company in a very strange way, and I'm just doing my due diligence. I wanted to confirm if this investment was indeed sanctioned by Viridian, or if he was perhaps operating outside of official company channels. I let the words hang. Operating outside of official company channels. That was corporate speak for fraud. Cynthia's voice went from warm to ice. $80,000 structured through your company. I have seen nothing about an executive buy-in of that nature. Maya, I am in a board finance meeting right now. I will look into this immediately. Thank you, Cynthia, I said. I don't want any legal blowback on my own company. I'm sure it's just a misunderstanding. I'll be in touch. She hung up. The first tremor had begun. Viridian Solutions was a publicly traded company. They feared nothing more than an SEC investigation, an internal fraud scandal, or an executive with compromised ethics. I had just handed them all 3. Leo came home just after 8, slamming the front door. He threw his briefcase onto the marble floor of the foyer, a clear violation of the rules of the house. What a hell of a day, he grumbled, loosening his tie as he walked into the kitchen where I was calmly reading. Viridian is in full panic mode. Cynthia Bright is breathing down everyone's neck about some compliance audit. It's a nightmare. Everyone's accounts are being reviewed. I looked up from my tablet, my face a mask of neutral concern. Oh no, that sounds terrible. Is it serious? It's just corporate garbage. He waved it off, pouring himself a large scotch. He truly believed the world revolved around him, but he never believed his actions had consequences. He drank half the glass in one gulp and then turned to me. his mood shifting from professional annoyance to personal grievance. "So," he said, trying to sound magnanimous, "have you thought about what I told you last night about my honesty?" I closed my tablet and placed it on the counter. I stood up and faced him, this hollow man who thought honesty was a coupon for forgiveness. "I have," I said, my voice soft. "I've thought about it a great deal. Leo, and you were right. Things have been static. You need freshness." A slow, triumphant grin spread across his face. He actually believed it. He thought he had won, that his mediocre charm had somehow worked again. "Maya, baby, I knew you'd see. I knew you would understand. I do understand," I continued. "And I think we need a break. We need some space. And you deserve to explore this. Really." "Why don't you take her away for the weekend? Take Kylie, get out of Denver, go somewhere nice." He was practically vibrating with excitement, mistaking my surgical precision for a progressive, open-minded wife. He thought this was the prelude to an open marriage, the best of all worlds for him. "Yes, yes, that's a perfect idea," he said, pulling out his phone. "We could go to Aspen. No, somewhere new. Maybe. Santa Fe." "Santa Fe is lovely," I said, my heart beating a slow, steady, triumphant rhythm. I had already checked the map. It was perfect. "I'll book it," he said, pulling out his phone. "I'll tell her. God, Maya, thank you. You're amazing." "You should go," I said, walking past him toward the stairs. "Enjoy yourselves." I paused at the bottom step and looked back. "And Leo, make sure you take that car, the red one. She deserves to be shown off properly. After all." His face lit up, his ego blazing. "You're right. She does. We'll take the Mercedes." "It's the perfect car for a road trip." "It is," I agreed. "Have a wonderful time." Friday morning was bright and offensively cheerful. Leo picked Kylie up from her apartment, the red Mercedes gleaming. He tossed their designer overnight bags into the small trunk, feeling like a movie star heading to a premiere. They pulled onto Interstate 25, heading south, the top down despite the November chill. Kylie, 26 and blissfully ignorant, turned the music up so loud the bass vibrated through the chassis. She was laughing, her blonde hair whipping around her face as she angled her phone for the perfect selfie, the red leather interior and the open road framing her excited expression. "On the road with my king," she shouted over the wind, typing the caption. "Finally getting away. Blessed." She posted it to Instagram before Leo could even object, though he had no intention of objecting. He glanced over, feeling a surge of animal pride. This was his new life. This was the freshness he deserved. He was free. He had the smart, suddenly understanding wife back home and the hot, adoring girl beside him. He had truly, finally, won at everything. "Let's stop for coffee," Kylie yelled. "The expensive place in Colorado Springs?" "Whatever you want, baby," Leo yelled back. He would stop for gas and coffee and, later, lunch. He would put it all on the Viridian Solutions corporate Amex. He'd been mixing personal and professional expenses for years. It was a standard executive perk, as far as he was concerned. What were they going to do? Fire him after the best quarter of his career? He felt completely, utterly untouchable. At the exact same moment, 300 miles north in a quiet wood-paneled office in downtown Denver, I was signing my name. Avery Walsh sat opposite me, a stack of freshly printed documents separating us like a barricade. There was no music here, just the heavy silence of consequence and the decisive scratch of my pen on the thick paper. "Emergency petition for the dissolution of marriage," I said, reading the header aloud before signing the final page. "And the temporary injunction freezing all marital assets and joint accounts," Avery added, pushing the next document toward me. "As of this signature, he will not be able to access a dime from your joint checking, savings, or brokerage accounts." He is cut off. I signed it. Now for the offense, Avery said. She picked up her desk phone, her movements precise. Are you ready to file the report? I nodded. I didn't need to guess where he was. I pulled out my own phone, opened a hidden app, and watched the small, pulsing red icon that represented my Mercedes move steadily south on the highway map. They just passed Colorado Springs, I said. They're making good time. Good. I dialed the non-emergency number for the Denver Police Department while Avery dialed her own contact. I need to report a stolen vehicle, I said into the phone, my voice calm and steady. It is a corporate asset, a 2023 Mercedes-AMG, color red. I provided the plate number. It was taken by let's call him a disgruntled employee. Yes, I have the VIN, and yes, I have its exact real-time GPS coordinates. The vehicle is currently traveling south on Interstate 25, just past exit 140. While I was methodically detailing the theft to a surprised police dispatcher, Avery was already speaking. Cynthia, good morning. Avery Walsh, calling on behalf of Maya Vance and Logos Prime Consulting. Avery's voice was pure, cold steel. I am calling to formally notify the board that your executive, Leo Vance, is the subject of an active criminal investigation. This morning, we filed a police report with the DPD for felony theft regarding a corporate asset, a vehicle valued at $80,000, which he fraudulently acquired. We have also provided the Denver District Attorney's Office with documentation of wire fraud related to that same $80,000 transaction, which Mr. Vance falsely represented as a Viridian investment. We just wanted to ensure Viridian was aware that its senior vice president is currently compromised. The silence on the other end, I imagined, was absolute. Cynthia Bright was realizing that the compliance audit she'd started yesterday was now a 5-alarm criminal scandal. Ms. Vance has, of course, stepped down from her charity board positions to avoid any conflict of interest with Viridian, Avery added as a final professional courtesy. We will be in touch. She hung up. I finished my own call. A dispatcher is routing the information to the Colorado State Patrol, I said. They're not the ones I'm worried about, Avery said, allowing herself a thin, reptilian smile. Now, we wait for his. In a boardroom at Viridian Solutions, an emergency all-hands call was happening with the executive board. Suspend him, immediately. Freeze his corporate accounts. All of them. The Amex, the expense accounts. Everything. Lock him out of the servers. Revoke his credentials. Someone get our general counsel on the line. Now Leo's career wasn't just ending. It was being systematically and surgically excised to protect the company from the infection he had become. He, of course, knew nothing. He was oblivious, full of expensive coffee and ego, speeding up, enjoying the car's power on the long, open stretches of road. Kylie had dozed off, her phone clutched in her hand. Leo saw the sign up ahead, a bright blue and yellow welcome. Welcome to New Mexico, land of enchantment. He zoomed past it at 85 miles an hour, not giving it a second thought. It was just another marker on his triumphant weekend. In Avery's office, I was still watching the tracker. The little red dot crept over the thick blue line that separated the states. He just crossed, I said, my voice quiet. And there it is, Avery said, closing her briefcase. The sound was a definitive, final click. The masterstroke. She had asked me the day before, why Santa Fe? Why not just let him get caught in Aspen? It's closer. Because Aspen is too easy, I had replied. It's still in Colorado. That's state-level theft. Messy. But he could lawyer his way out of it, plead it down. It's manageable. Avery had understood immediately. Stealing an $80,000 car is a serious state crime. But the moment Leo Vance, in his profound and boundless stupidity, drove that stolen asset, my corporate property, across the border from Colorado into New Mexico, he violated federal law. He wasn't just a car thief anymore. He had just committed interstate transportation of stolen property, a federal offense. The kind of crime that doesn't just involve the state patrol. The kind of crime that gets the FBI involved. The kind of crime that carries mandatory minimum sentences in a federal prison. He thought he was going on vacation. He was, in fact, elevating his own indictment. I had suggested Santa Fe. I had encouraged him to take that car. I didn't just want to divorce him. I wanted to erase him. And he was driving himself right into the trap, with the top down and the radio blaring. I could see it all perfectly, even from hundreds of miles away in Denver. I didn't need to be there. I had set every single piece on the board, and I knew Leo so intimately, his arrogance, his impatience, his paper-thin ego. I could see him as clearly as if I were standing in the corner of that quiet, expensive lobby in Santa Fe. He and Kylie would have walked in, Leo performing his role as the high-powered executive, Kylie clinging to his arm, wide-eyed at the luxury. He would have been brimming with a conqueror's arrogance, the long drive and the successful getaway making him feel powerful. He'd slide the Viridian Solutions corporate Amex across the polished marble check-in desk with a magnanimous flourish. The young woman at the desk would smile politely and swipe the card. Her smile would falter. "I'm sorry, Mr. Vance," she would say, her voice quiet. "This card has been declined." I can see the flash of annoyance on Leo's face. Not worry, just annoyance. He'd blame the machine, or the bank. "That's impossible," he'd snap, his voice a little too loud for the serene environment. "Run it again. It's a top-tier corporate account." She would run it again, and again, the small red light. "I'm very sorry, sir. It's not being accepted." "Do you have another form of payment?" Kylie would be shifting beside him now, her smile tightening, the first flicker of embarrassment appearing. Other guests, wealthy and quiet, would be glancing over. Leo, his face darkening, would angrily pull out his personal wallet. He'd slap down his personal debit card, the one tied to our joint account, the account I had frozen that morning. "Fine, use this," he'd command. The clerk, now looking nervous, would run the card. A pause. A longer, more agonizing pause. "Sir, this card has also been declined." This is the moment the panic would hit him. The public humiliation. This was not in his script. "What is going on?" he'd demand, his voice rising, bouncing off the polished floors. "This is ridiculous. I have over $200,000 in that account. Get your manager." Kylie would be shrinking, her face pale. She'd step back slightly, her hand dropping from his arm. This wasn't the powerful man who had promised her the world. This was a man yelling at a hotel clerk. And then, right on cue, 2 New Mexico State Patrol officers would enter through the automatic glass doors. They wouldn't be rushing. They'd move with that calm, deliberate authority that is so much more terrifying than haste. They'd scan the lobby, their eyes landing immediately on the loud, agitated man at the front desk and the bright red convertible parked just outside. They'd approach him slowly. "Sir, are you Leo Vance?" one of them would ask, his voice polite but firm. Leo, turning, would see the uniforms and his anger would instantly curdle into a confused, defensive bluster. "Yes. What's wrong? Is there a problem with my reservation? Your staff here is completely incompetent. We need to talk to you about the car you're driving, sir," the officer would say, ignoring the outburst. "The red Mercedes parked out front." At the mention of the car, Kylie would take a full, definitive step back. She would physically detach herself from him, her eyes wide with a dawning, animal fear. She was realizing in that instant that this was not a financial problem. This was a police problem. "The car," Leo would laugh, a high-pitched, nervous sound. "What about the car?" "It's my car. Well, my wife's. She bought it for me. It's a misunderstanding." And then the first officer would unclip the handcuffs from his belt. The sound, that small metallic click, would echo in the silent lobby. "Mr. Vance, you are being detained. We have received a report that the vehicle in your possession was reported stolen." The blood would drain from Leo's face. Stolen. That's insane, I told you. My wife bought it. This is a simple mistake, Maya. Call my wife. The cuffs would snap shut around his wrists, behind his back, forcing him to stand in a bowed, humiliated posture, in the middle of a five-star hotel lobby, in front of his 26-year-old mistress and a dozen wealthy strangers. Leo Vance, the second officer would say, pulling out a small card and beginning to read in a clear monotone. The vehicle has been reported stolen by Logos Prime Consulting out of Denver, Colorado. You are being detained in relation to federal charges for the interstate transportation of stolen property. You have the right to remain silent. Leo would just stare, his mouth open, his entire carefully constructed world dissolving under the flat, unforgiving fluorescent light of reality. He wasn't a king. He wasn't a conqueror. He was just a common thief in a very expensive suit. The Santa Fe Municipal Police Station was not built for comfort. It was built for processing. Leo had been in a small, concrete holding cell for nearly 6 hours, long enough for the adrenaline from the lobby to have worn off completely, replaced by a cold, septic fear. The suit he wore with such pride that morning was now rumpled, stained with sweat, and smelled faintly of the cell's sour disinfectant. He was filthy. He was terrified. He had spent the first hour yelling, demanding a lawyer, trying to use his Viridian VP voice on the unimpressed deputies. He spent the next hours in a state of panicked silence. His world shrunk to the dimensions of the concrete box. I, on the other hand, had a very productive afternoon. While he was being processed, I was in the air. I had chartered a private jet from Denver, arriving at the Santa Fe Executive Airport in just over an hour. I was accompanied by Avery's local New Mexico counsel, a sharp man named Diaz, and a specialist in asset repossession, who was already at the impound lot where the Mercedes was being held, checking its condition and securing its release to its rightful owner. I felt nothing. It was a business trip. They moved Leo to a small, windowless interrogation room. The fluorescent lights hummed, casting a sick greenish glow on the cinder block walls. He was sitting at a metal table, his hands cuffed in front of him. He looked up, his eyes bloodshot and desperate, when the heavy door clicked open. He was expecting a public defender, some overworked lawyer who would listen to his rambling, confused story. He got me. I walked in. I could feel his gaze register the change in me. I was not the wife from the gala. I was not the supportive partner from the kitchen. I was wearing a charcoal gray, perfectly tailored business suit. My hair was pulled back in a severe, professional knot. I was flanked by Diaz, who carried a heavy leather briefcase. His relief was pathetic, a disgusting, wet sound. Maya, thank God you're here. He half shouted, trying to stand before the chain of the cuffs pulled him back down. Tell them you have to tell them this is a stupid, insane misunderstanding. Tell them about the car. It's our car. Tell them you bought it for me. Tell them. I didn't sit. I walked to the metal table and stood opposite him. Diaz placed the briefcase on the table and opened it. But I didn't look at him. I looked directly at Leo. My voice was as cold and flat as the concrete floor. I am not here for you. Leo, I am here to recover my company's stolen property. What? What company? He stammered, his eyes wide with confusion. What are you talking about? I reached into the file Diaz held open and pulled out a single, crisp sheet of paper. I placed it on the table between us and slid it forward until it hit his chained hands. He stared down at it, squinting, his mind slow to process the formal, official document. It was a copy of the finalized certificate of title, issued by the state of Colorado. I tapped the most important line with one manicured finger. Read it. Leo. His eyes followed my finger. He read the words, his lips moving silently. Registered owner Logos Prime Consulting, LLC. He looked up, shaking his head, a desperate, confused animal. Logos Prime, your company, no. That's wrong. That's a mistake. I tapped the page again, just below the owner line. And that line. Read that one, too. Authorized officer, he whispered, his voice cracking. Maya Sullivan. He stared at my maiden name, the name I had used to build my company, the name I had before I ever met him. He looked up, his face ashen, a complete and terrifying void opening behind his eyes. The bluster was gone, the arrogance was gone. All that was left was the hollow, terrified core. No, he whispered, shaking his head faster. No, that's not right. You signed the withdrawal from the trust. You gave me the money. You said it was an investment. You said it was for us. You bragged, I said, my voice cutting through his pathetic whisper. You stood on that balcony, drowning in my grandfather's champagne, and you bragged about the car you bought her. You were so proud of that car. You were so proud of the lie. I leaned in slightly, lowering my voice so only he and the detectives watching through the one-way glass could hear it. You were so excited about the car. You never bothered to look at the paperwork, did you? You were so lazy, so desperate. You signed anything I put in front of you. You signed the withdrawal. Yes. But you also signed the purchase agreement. For my company. I tapped the paper one last time. But did you ever see the title? Leo. It was never your car. It was never your money. It's in my name. And you stole it. He stared at the title, and then at me, and the last shred of his fight just evaporated. He slumped against the back of the chair, a puppet with his strings cut. Mr. Vance? Diaz said, stepping forward, his voice professional and devoid of any emotion. My colleague in Denver, Ms. Walsh, has been in communication with the U.S. Attorney's Office. Given that this is a first-time offense and the property has been fully recovered, my client, Logos Prime Consulting, is prepared to inform the authorities that she believes this was a profound personal misunderstanding rather than a malicious act. A tiny, pathetic spark of hope lit in Leo's eyes. A misunderstanding. Yes, Maya, that's all it was. A stupid misunderstanding. Consequently, Diaz continued, cutting him off, it is likely the federal charges will not be pursued. The relief that washed over Leo was so intense it was almost sickening. He sagged, closing his eyes. Thank you. God, thank you. In exchange for that consideration, Diaz said, we have some documents that require your immediate signature. He placed a new, much thicker stack of papers on the table, directly on top of the car title. He clicked a pen and handed it to Leo. What is this? Leo whispered, his hands still cuffed. That is a petition for an uncontested dissolution of your marriage, Diaz stated flatly. You'll note my client has waived any request for alimony, despite your circumstances. Divorce. Leo looked at me, his eyes wide and pleading. Maya, no, we can fix this. We can go to therapy. This is just a... Sign it, Leo, I said, my voice quiet. The terms are simple, Diaz interjected, turning the page for him. You will waive any and all claims to any and all assets, marital or otherwise. This includes, but is not limited to, the property in Hilltop. He gestured to another document, which, as you'll see, has already reverted to Ms. Vance's sole ownership per the moral turpitude clause of the Sullivan Trust, which you triggered. Moral. What? Leo stammered. You will also waive any claim to her brokerage accounts, her personal accounts, and the contents of the home, Diaz continued. Furthermore, you will assume full and sole responsibility for any and all personal debts incurred by you in your own name, including any credit card balances. He tapped a line. Specifically, any expenses related to a Ms. Kylie Jennings. Leo stared at the paper. He looked from Diaz to me. He was cornered. He was trapped. He knew it. You're taking everything. He breathed. The house. The everything. You have a choice. Leo, I said, my voice hard. You can sign these papers, and you can walk out of this police station tonight a free man, a broke man, but a free one. Or you can refuse. I will walk out of this room. My lawyer will call the U.S. attorney, and I will pursue the federal charges against you for interstate transportation of stolen property. You will be arraigned here, in New Mexico, and you will likely be spending the next 3 to 5 years in a federal prison. Your choice. He looked down at the signature line. He looked at the holding cell door. He looked at me, his eyes full of a hatred so pure it was almost beautiful. He knew he was beaten. The officer will remove one cuff so you can sign, Diaz said. Leo's hand was shaking so badly he could barely hold the pen. He scribbled his name, a desperate, angry scratch, on every line Diaz pointed to. When it was done, Diaz collected the pages, his face impassive. He put them carefully back into the briefcase. I stood up. Officer, I called to the door. We're finished here. I picked up the small silver object my asset recovery specialist had given me, the keys to the Mercedes. I dangled them in front of him for just a second. This was never a misunderstanding. Leo, I said. It was an education. I turned and walked out of the room, Diaz right behind me. We left him there, at the table, his signature still drying on the papers that erased him from my life. We left him in a foreign city with no money, no credit cards, no car, and no hotel room. While Leo was being released to the street, his mistress, Kylie, was in another room, being questioned as a material witness. The police, of course, let her go. She was just a passenger. But in that hour, she learned the truth. She learned the car was stolen. She learned Leo was not a high-powered executive. He was a fired, penniless fraud. She learned he wasn't married to a difficult wife. He was married to the woman who owned the car he was now in jail for. Kylie, a life coach dedicated to her own best life, did not wait for him. She did not go to the jail. She used her own credit card to call an Uber, and she went straight to the Santa Fe airport, leaving her king behind. On Monday morning, Leo, presumably on a Greyhound bus back to Denver, received an email on his phone. It was from the board of Viridian Solutions. It informed him of his immediate termination for gross ethical violations and misuse of company property. Attached, as a final insult, was a comprehensive invoice for $42,000, detailing every single personal charge, every hotel, every spa day, every handbag for Kylie that he had put on the corporate Amex over the last 6 months. They were demanding immediate repayment. That same morning, I sat in my home office. The house was quiet. I signed the final activation papers for my grandfather's $5 million trust. The decoy was gone, the test was passed, and the full weight of my legacy settled into my sole control. An hour later, I was on the highway, heading north back to Denver. I was driving the red Mercedes, the top down, the sun on my face. The engine was a powerful, satisfying roar. I turned the stereo up, found a song full of victory and rage, and I pressed my foot down on the accelerator. 2 weeks had passed. The silence in the hilltop house was profound, clean. I hadn't been back other than to retrieve my personal belongings. I was working from my real office, the headquarters of Logos Prime Consulting. The air was different here. It smelled like server infrastructure and coffee, not betrayal. The red Mercedes was the first piece of business I handled. I kept it for exactly 48 hours, just long enough for my asset manager to arrange a sale back to the dealership. It was a beautiful piece of engineering, but it was tainted. It was a monument to his pathetic, desperate grasp for a life he hadn't earned. I didn't want it. I sold it at a slight loss, which meant nothing. The check for the full amount, somewhere around $78,000, I immediately endorsed and donated to a local Denver charity, one that provides legal aid to women escaping financially abusive relationships. It felt like sanitizing the wound. The second piece of business was the future. My grandfather's $5 million trust was now fully liquid and under my sole command. The day before, I had signed the purchase agreement for the adjacent office suite, the one I had been eyeing for a year. We were expanding, tripling our footprint. I approved the hiring of 10 new engineers. Logos Prime was about to stop being a boutique consultancy and start being a major player. I was in my office, reviewing the new architectural plans, when my personal cell phone buzzed. It was an unknown number, local area code. I usually ignore those, but a cold, final instinct told me to take it. I picked up. "This is Maya Sullivan." There was a pause, just the sound of thin, shallow breathing and a television in the background. Then, a voice I barely recognized. It was hollow, reedy, stripped of all its performative baritone confidence. "Maya, Leo, I need to talk to you," he stammered. "Please, just listen." I leaned back in my ergonomic desk chair, looking out the window at the city. "We have nothing to talk about, Leo. You signed the papers." "Maya, please," he begged. Actually begged. The sound was pathetic, whining. "You can't do this. I have nothing. I'm sleeping on Greg's couch. Greg's couch. His place smells like old pizza. I lost my job. I lost my car. I lost everything. You took everything." "That sounds like a personal problem, Leo. Not a legal one," I said, my voice as flat as the glass I was looking through. "Just something," he pleaded, his voice cracking, dissolving into a desperate sob. "A severance, a buyout, anything, for 12 years. Maya, 12 years of my life. You can't just throw me out with nothing. It's not fair." His pleading suddenly evaporated, replaced by the familiar oily anger I knew so well, the victimhood. "You ruined my life," he shrieked into the phone. "You planned this. You trapped me. That whole thing in Santa Fe, the car, the investment. You set me up. You knew I would do it. You knew." I stood up and walked to my office window, looking down at the busy street, at the people moving forward, at the commerce, at the life he would never be a part of again. I felt nothing. No anger, no sadness, just a profound, cold calm, the quiet of a problem finally solved. "No, Leo," I said, my voice perfectly level. "You're wrong. I didn't build the trap. You did." "What?" he spat. "You built it yourself," I said, spacing the words, piece by piece, every single day for years. "You built it with your arrogance. You built it with your laziness. You built it with your affairs and your endless, pathetic lies and your desperate need to feel important. You built it when you bragged, when you stole, when you couldn't be bothered to read." I took a quiet breath. I said, was just the person holding the paperwork. My grandfather taught me one simple rule. "Leo, always read every single word before you sign." I didn't wait for a reply. I ended the call. Then I opened my contacts, found the unknown number, and I blocked it. Permanently. I sat back down at my desk. The incident was over. It was a file to be closed. I turned back to my email, ready to get back to the architectural plans. An unread message sat at the top of my inbox. The sender was from a major West Coast venture capital firm. The subject line was Introduction and Query Relogos Prime. I opened it. The managing partner had apparently heard through the grapevine gossip travels fast from boards like Viridian's about how I had handled a complex and sensitive asset situation. They weren't interested in the gossip, but in the mind that had engineered the solution. They were impressed by my strategic and decisive corporate maneuvering. They were looking to invest in new, founder-led tech firms outside of Silicon Valley. They weren't interested in a small, $5 million expansion. They wanted to know what I could do with serious capital. The email ended with a simple question. "What would your 5-year plan look like? Ms. Sullivan, with a $50 million investment. Not $5 million, 50. I looked at the number. I thought of Leo, On a couch smelling like old pizza. Erased. I thought of my grandfather and his test. I smiled. I clicked reply and began to type, outlining my terms. The game wasn't over. It was just beginning. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I'm really curious. Where in the world are you listening from? Please let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear your thoughts and connect. Don't forget to subscribe to Lily Revenge Stories, like this video, and if you want to support the channel, please hit that hype button so this story can be heard by more people.